Americas. For more than a century, our story of the Americas has begun with a single date, 13,000 years ago. A number printed in textbooks, repeated in documentaries, and etched into museum plaques like a sacred threshold between before and after. According to this version, humanity arrived here at the end of the last ice age, trekking across a frozen land bridge from Siberia to Alaska, carrying little more than stone spears and the hunger to survive. Everything that followed, villages, cities, calendars, astronomy, art, was supposed to have grown from that late beginning. But lately, that tidy chronology has begun to crack. Beneath its surface, a quiet rumble of evidence builds. Footprints in ancient mud older than the supposed first people, tools buried too deep for comfort, genes that whisper of older wanderers whose names we've lost. The silence beneath the timeline is beginning to speak. Imagine the map of the Americas 13,000 years ago. Ice sheets still smothered much of the north. The interior corridors of Canada were impassable, yet archaeological sites thousands of miles apart, Chile in the far south, Virginia in the east, Oregon in the west, show traces of humans that should not exist there. How did they cross a continent before the ice melted? The answer forces us to look again at the line itself. Every civilization builds a story of origins. The Clovis first model became ours. A single migration, a single beginning. It fit the tools found near Clovis, New Mexico. Beautifully fluted spear points dated to around 13,000 BP. For decades, those points were treated like the first words of a long book. Anything older was dismissed as a printing error. Yet science, like language, evolves when new letters appear. In the last few decades, genetic research has mapped the migrations of ancient peoples through DNA recovered from bones, teeth, and even sediments. These genomes tell a more intricate tale. Multiple waves arriving at different times, some perhaps before the great ice sheets sealed the north. The 13,000-year wall was never solid. It was built of assumptions. What makes this so unsettling isn't just the possibility that people were here earlier, it's what that implies about everything that followed. If humans walked these lands tens of thousands of years before the textbook dawn, then the foundations of our understanding of civilization itself begin to blur. Cultures we call primitive might be echoes, not beginnings. Cities like Caral, Tiwanaku, or Teotihuacan could be late survivors of far older knowledge rather than spontaneous miracles of progress. Archaeologists once argued that civilization requires agriculture requires stability, and stability begins only after the Ice Age. But what if intelligence came first? Adapting, migrating, leaving behind faint fingerprints in stone and soil. Across the continent, new excavations are pulling those fingerprints from the ground. They belong to hands that shaped tools 18,000 years ago in Chile, to feet that pressed into wet earth 23,000 years ago in New Mexico, to minds that watched the same constellations we still see tonight. And yet, for each discovery that extends the horizon, another voice insists it must be a mistake. Because to move the timeline means to rewrite the story, and stories are power. Whole academic careers, national identities, even funding systems rest on the stability of 13,000 years. To question it is to loosen the anchor that keeps history from drifting. Still, the river of evidence flows. Radiocarbon ages are recalibrated, genetic clocks retuned, migration models redrawn. Each adjustment pushes the curtain of prehistory farther back into the Ice Age fog. The silence beneath the timeline grows thinner, more translucent, as if light is seeping through from another epoch. Perhaps the real mystery isn't when humans first reached the Americas, but how we decided where to stop looking. The date 13,000 years ago became less a fact than a comfort, a border drawn to protect us from an ocean of uncertainty. Yet the ground itself refuses to obey. Beneath the layers of accepted history, something old awaits, patient, persistent, asking only to be seen. We begin our descent through that buried silence, following the first traces that broke through the wall. Footprints left in ancient mud, stone flakes older than memory, and the quiet question echoing through them all. Who walked here before the world we know began? The story begins not with bones or tools, but with footsteps. Across a dry lake bed in New Mexico, beneath layers of gypsum dust and ancient sediment, hundreds of fossilized human prints stretch into the distance, small, large, side by side, as if a group of people had crossed a muddy plain thousands of years ago and vanished. When scientists dated the seeds trapped within the sediment, the results shook the foundations of archaeology, between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. That's nearly 10,000 years older than the moment textbooks say humans first arrived in the Americas. The site, now known as White Sands, doesn't just preserve traces of people, it preserves motion, intent, and intimacy. There are children running, adults carrying toddlers, stride patterns suggesting urgency or migration. Beside them, the prints of mammoths, dire wolves, and giant sloths form a prehistoric choreography frozen in time. It isn't myth or metaphor, it's evidence pressed into the earth by living feet. For years, archaeologists debated whether those tracks could be trusted. Some claimed contamination skewed the radiocarbon dates. Others said the seeds might have been redeposited from younger layers. Yet repeated analyses, including radiocarbon checks on pollen grains and optically stimulated luminescence tests, have confirmed the same shocking timeline. Humanity was here during the height of the last ice age, when glaciers still sealed much of the north. If White Sands were the only anomaly, it might be dismissed. But it isn't. In Chile's Monteverde, nearly at the southern tip of South America, archaeologists uncovered the remains of wooden huts, hearths, and even chewed seaweed dated to at least 18,500 years ago, 5 millennia older than the Clovis horizon. Nearby lay twined plant fibers, proof that its people weren't just surviving, but crafting and organizing. How could they have reached so far south so early unless they had arrived thousands of years before? Far to the northeast, in Pedra Ferrada, Brazil, stone flakes discovered in deep strata show percussion marks too deliberate to be natural. The oldest layers date to 32,000 years, perhaps even 48,000 in the most controversial samples. Critics argue the marks are accidental, rocks shattered by fire or pressure, but side by side with hearth remains and charcoal smudges, the pattern looks less like coincidence and more like culture. Across the continent, other hints keep surfacing: isolated artifacts, ancient fire pits, protein residues on stone blades found beneath glacial sediments. At the Topper site in South Carolina, thousands of flint chips buried under the Clovis layer point to tool-making traditions long before 13,000 BP. Each site by itself might be questionable. Together, they form a whispering chorus saying the same thing: we were here earlier. The question becomes not if, but who. Were these early inhabitants related to later Native American lineages, or were they an entirely separate migration now lost to time? Genetic data suggests that the ancestors of modern indigenous peoples diverged from East Asian populations around 25,000 years ago, aligning eerily well with these archaeological finds. Some researchers propose a Beringian standstill, where ancient peoples lived for millennia in an ice-free refuge before dispersing south. Others imagine coastal voyagers skimming the Pacific edge in boats, following kelp forests and tides. A maritime migration erased by rising seas. If true, then entire chapters of prehistory lie drowned beneath continental shelves, invisible to traditional archaeology. Every new discovery seems to pull the starting line backward: 13,000, 18,000, 23,000, 32,000 years. The deeper we dig, the older the story becomes, and perhaps this is the true heresy, that civilization may not rise from nothing, but from layers of forgotten lives built atop one another like sediment. Standing at white sands today, as twilight paints the desert silver, you can almost feel those ancient travelers near, the weight of their feet pressing through time. The tracks ripple faintly in the fading light, as if the past were breathing beneath the dust. Maybe they weren't the first to arrive. Maybe they were already descendants of someone older, survivors of an age that had already come and gone. Next, we follow the scientists who tried to measure these ages and discover that even time itself, when pressed too hard, begins to crumble. Time, in science, is supposed to be absolute, a steady current flowing in one direction. But in archaeology, time is fragile. It bends with every assumption we make about how nature behaves. The radiocarbon clock, the tool we trust most to measure the age of our past, is one such fragile compass. Precise on paper, yet swayed by invisible forces that shift with the sky, the sea, and even the stars. For nearly a century, carbon-14 dating has been the foundation of archaeological chronology. It works on a simple idea. Living things absorb radioactive carbon from the atmosphere. When they die, that isotope decays at a known rate. By measuring how much remains, scientists can estimate when the organism last lived. Elegant, logical, seemingly infallible. But like every compass, it points true only when the field around it is stable. And Earth's field has never been still. When cosmic rays strike our atmosphere, they create carbon-14. But cosmic radiation fluctuates, influenced by solar storms, magnetic reversals, volcanic eruptions, even supernovae. The level of 14C in the air has not been constant, meaning that ancient samples can appear thousands of years younger or older than they truly are. To correct this, researchers calibrate results using tree rings and ice cores. Yet those records themselves stretch back only so far, barely 50,000 years. Beyond that, the curve of time begins to blur. Nowhere does that blur become more controversial than in the Americas. At a dig in Viquilio, Mexico, archaeologists unearthed blackened wood fragments deep beneath volcanic sediment. When tested, the samples yielded an age of 250,000 years. So old it threatened to rewrite not just American history, but human history itself. The result was dismissed as contamination, though no contamination was proven. The excavation was closed, the samples shelved. The reason was simple: such a number didn't fit inside the model. At Pedra Furada, Brazil, similar logic played out. Stone tools found in layers that could be 32,000 years old were labelled naturally fractured stones. Critics said the site couldn't be dated reliably because there was no suitable organic material. But that's the paradox. The absence of datable carbon doesn't mean the absence of people. It means the clock we rely on can't tick there, and instead of questioning the tool, we discard the evidence. Even when radiocarbon works, it often whispers inconsistencies. Samples taken inches apart in the same layer can differ by tens of thousands of years. Burnt wood, bones, and shells, each tells a slightly different story, as if the Earth itself can't agree on its own age. And yet archaeology continues to lean on that clock like a crutch, because without it, our narrative collapses into mist. One quietly acknowledged truth within dating labs is the soft censorship of anomalous results. Laboratories sometimes refuse to process samples that appear too old for their context. Grants, reputations, and theoretical frameworks depend on coherence. Data that don't fit are labelled errors rather than questions. One archaeologist once confessed he had to falsify the provenience of an artifact, claiming it came from a different site, just to have it tested. When science must lie to tell the truth, time itself becomes political. It isn't that radiocarbon dating is wrong, it's that we've mistaken its precision for truth. A method built on probability has become an article of faith. We call it the gold standard, but every gold bar rests on shifting sand. And if our most trusted compass wavers, what happens to the map it built? The dates of Monteverde, White Sands, Pedra Ferrada, each tested, debated, recalibrated, suggest that our timeline isn't a line at all. It's a field of magnetic pulls, constantly being redrawn by evidence we'd rather ignore. Perhaps that's the deeper mystery of the 13,000-year wall. Not that it hides the truth, but that it comforts us with the illusion of certainty. To cross that wall is to step into a landscape where even time has to be rediscovered. Where do you stand on that line? With the comfort of certainty or the call of the unknown? Let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time feels like where you are. As one geologist once said, rocks remember everything. We just haven't learned their language. To read that language, we must look beyond the numbers, to the cities and monuments that stand as silent witnesses, their stones undated yet immortal. Our next step leads south, into a desert valley in Peru, where ruins 5 millennia old whisper of a civilization that may have inherited knowledge from a much older world. At first glance, the super valley of Peru looks lifeless, a desert plain between the Pacific and the Andes, scattered with wind-carved hills and bleached stones. Yet beneath that silence lies the heartbeat of one of humanity's oldest known cities. Its name is Caral. For thousands of years it slept under layers of dust, mistaken for ordinary mounds. Then, at the turn of the 21st century, archaeologist Ruth Shady Solis brushed away the sand and found geometry. What emerged was not chaos, but design. Stepped pyramids, sunken plazas, stairways aligned to the stars. Radiocarbon tests dated Caral to around 2600 BCE, as old as the earliest pyramids of Egypt and older than the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Yet here, in a place the textbooks had called prehistoric, rose a full-fledged metropolis of stone and order. Caral rewrote the map of civilization. It had music before weapons, mathematics before metal. Its builders used quarried stone reinforced with woven reed mesh, a technique that absorbs earthquakes, a form of seismic engineering rediscovered only in modern times. They laid out residential zones, plazas for ceremony, and pyramids whose staircases were aligned so the sun's rays at solstice fell exactly along the central axis. Beneath the dust of the Andes, someone had calculated the heavens. In the ruins, researchers found flutes made of condor and pelican bone, fragments of corn husks, gourds, textiles, and fishing nets laced with shell weights from the coast 20 kilometers away. The evidence revealed a society sustained not by conquest, but by trade, between mountains, rivers, and sea. No fortresses, no arrowheads, only harmony and astonishing design. But the greater mystery isn't what they built, it's how they built it without the things we associate with progress. No wheels, no beasts of burden, no metal tools. And still they constructed a city that has survived earthquakes for 5,000 years. The answer seems to lie in intention. Each stone fits into a larger rhythm, as though architecture itself was a form of prayer. Some walls bear spiral carvings and circular motifs, symbols that reappear later across the Americas. Spirals that mirror the sun's path, the movement of galaxies, the turning of time. To the people of Caral, the city wasn't just a settlement, it was a living mandala, a mirror of the cosmos. Even their instruments, bone flutes tuned to pentatonic scales, may have been used to resonate within the circular plazas, turning sound into sacred vibration. Ruth Shady called Caral the mother of civilizations in the Americas, yet many suspect it was not a beginning but a memory. A reconstruction after catastrophe, Geological evidence shows massive floods and sea level shifts struck Peru's coast before Caral's rise. Could its founders have been survivors rebuilding what they once knew? If so, Caral may represent not humanity's first ascent, but its return. Around its pyramids lie sealed chambers filled with ash and burnt offerings, evidence of ritual closure. It seems the people of Caral consciously ended their era, covering sacred spaces before abandoning them. No war destroyed the city. Time did. The wind buried it, and history forgot. When you stand atop the Great Pyramid at sunset, the Soup River gleams like a thread of light winding toward the Pacific. The valley hums with silence, but the geometry remains, angles meeting the solstice sun, plazas echoing with lost music. You feel the sense that Caral was never fully gone. It only stepped aside, waiting to be remembered. And perhaps memory is exactly what the next civilization inherited. Far to the north, in the jungles of Veracruz and Tabasco, colossal stone faces stare through the centuries. Faces so massive and foreign they seem to belong to another world. Were these the descendants of Caral's architects, or the guardians of something older still? We turn now toward those giants in basalt, the people modern archaeology calls the Olmec, and the enigma of the faces that refuse to close their eyes. They watch in silence, 20 colossal heads half buried in the jungles of Veracruz and Tabasco, Mexico. Their features are broad, their expressions calm, their gaze eternal. Each face carved from a single block of basalt, some weighing over 50 tons. They are known as the Olmec heads, and they do not belong to the timeline we've been taught. No two are alike. One smiles faintly, another seems stern. Some wear helmets carved with intricate bands. Others bear marks that might be writing, but what unites them is their scale and their mystery. They appear suddenly without any trace of evolution from simpler forms. Around 1200 BCE, the Olmec civilization emerges as if fully formed, building ceremonial centers, drainage systems, and pyramids of earth, then disappears into the mist of history. Archaeologists call the Olmec the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the source from which the Maya, Aztec, and Zapotec drew their calendars, deities, and cosmic worldview. Yet the Olmec left no written chronicles to explain who they were. The heads are their speech. The enigma deepens when we consider how they were made. The basalt came from the Tuxtla Mountains, dozens of kilometers away, across swamps and rivers. The Olmec had no wheels, no beasts of burden, no metal chisels. To move such stones, they would have needed engineering knowledge beyond what traditional history allows. The standard explanation, rafts, rollers, and raw manpower, feels fragile against the sheer precision of the result. The heads aren't crude, they are masterpieces of symmetry and proportion. Some researchers notice features that seem foreign: broad noses, full lips, and facial proportions unlike local populations. Others caution against racial interpretation, arguing that the faces represent stylized rulers or gods. Still, the question lingers. Why do they look so unlike their neighbours? Were they portraits of real individuals, or symbols of a vanished lineage remembered in stone? What unsettles scholars most isn't their appearance, but their intentional burial. Many heads were found face down, deliberately interred as if in ritual. It's as though the Olmec wanted to hide them, return them to the earth. Were they burying their ancestors, their gods, or a memory too dangerous to preserve in daylight? Traces of the Olmec worldview echo through their art: jaguar-human hybrids, feathered serpents, and sky portals that prefigure later Mesoamerican deities. Their monuments align with celestial axes, marking solstices and star risings. On the Cascajal block, a carved tablet found in 2006, scholars identified a series of abstract symbols, possibly the earliest known writing in the Americas. If authentic, it means literacy here predates even the Maya script by centuries. But where did such knowledge come from? The Olmec appear suddenly with metallurgy, astronomy, irrigation, and the mathematics of sacred geometry. Then just as abruptly, they vanish. No record of war, no mass destruction, only decline and silence. It's as if their culture was absorbed by later peoples who remembered the form but not the meaning. Independent researchers suggest the Olmec inherited their wisdom from survivors of an earlier epoch, perhaps even from a pre-flood civilization, the one Caral may have echoed. The colossal heads in that view are not rulers but memorials, faces of the first people, guardians of the dawn. In San Lorenzo, one of the oldest Olmec centers, archaeologists found the remnants of complex drainage channels carved from basalt blocks. Water flowed beneath plazas, cooling the air and creating resonance. To stand there today is to feel an acoustic hum that seems deliberate, almost musical. Some believe water itself was sacred to them, a mirror between worlds. The Olmec heads may have been arranged around such plazas as resonant sentinels, vibrating with the sound of ritual drums and flowing water. If so, these weren't just sculptures. They were instruments of memory, vessels holding frequencies of a forgotten science. When night falls over the tropical lowlands, the air grows heavy, and you can almost see their eyes glint in the torchlight. They do not accuse, they wait, perhaps for recognition, perhaps for the moment humanity remembers who carved them, and why they chose to hide their own image beneath the soil. Because beyond those faces lies a plateau where stone itself seems to have been bent by impossible hands, where engineers of the Andes shape diorite and andesite with surgical precision that mocks our tools. The trail of the lost builders leads us next to the high plains of Bolivia, to Tiwanaku and Puma Punku, the cities that whisper of machines made of stone. At nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, where oxygen thins and clouds drag across the Andean peaks, lie the shattered ruins of Tiwanaku, a city so old and so precise it seems to belong to another world. Stones the size of small houses lie scattered like pieces of a broken machine, not rough, not eroded, but cut and shaped with millimetric perfection, their edges meeting at flawless right angles. And nearby, at a smaller complex called Puma Punku, the mystery becomes almost unbearable. Here, immense blocks of andesite and diorite, among the hardest stones on Earth, are carved into intricate H shapes and interlocking grooves that seem as if moulded rather than chiseled. The surfaces are flat to fractions of a millimeter. Circular holes are drilled straight through with mechanical precision, as though someone once used rotary tools made of steel or diamond. Yet according to mainstream archaeology, the builders possessed no iron, no steel, not even the wheel. When early explorers stumbled upon Puma Punku in the 16th century, they thought the ruins must have been crafted by gods. The Aymara people who live nearby still call it the Gate of the Puma, a threshold between the human and divine worlds. They say it was built by the Viracocha, bearded beings of light who emerged from Lake Titicaca to teach humankind the arts of civilization. To the west, the lake still shimmers, vast, high, and impossibly calm, as if guarding the memory of its makers. Geologists confirm that many blocks at Tiwanaku weigh 100 to 130 tons, quarried from mountains over 10 kilometers away. Transporting them without advanced tools, cranes, or beasts of burden seems almost absurd. Some researchers propose rolling them on logs. But no large forests existed at this altitude. Others suggest reed sleds on wet clay. But how to control 100 tons of stone down steep terrain? Each theory strains against the evidence. Archaeologists date Tiwanaku's peak to around 500 and 900 CE, yet astronomical alignments of the Colossal temple suggest an origin thousands of years earlier. When the solstice sun rises, its rays pass through the temple's eastern gate in perfect alignment, a precision that would be lost if the structure had been built even a few centuries later or earlier due to changes in Earth's axial tilt. If that alignment was deliberate, the original construction could predate accepted history by millennia, and the symbolism embedded in its architecture speaks of more than engineering. The Gateway of the Sun, a single monolithic arch weighing 10 tons, is carved with a central deity surrounded by 32 winged figures. Some appear to carry circular objects, others stand beside geometrical motifs resembling gears or rays. Scholars identify the figure as Viracocha, the creator god. But in the language of myth, creation and technology often merge. Gods who shape mountains, beings who carve stone with fire or sound. At Puma Punku, the H-shaped blocks fit together like modular components, not randomly, but in standardized dimensions, suggesting mass production. When placed side by side, the grooves and recesses align in patterns reminiscent of mechanical assembly. Some engineers have speculated that these were once part of a massive structure, perhaps a ceremonial complex with moving parts, or a device for channeling sound, water, or even energy. One particularly haunting discovery came from the subterranean temple nearby. A sunken courtyard lined with stone heads embedded in the walls, each one carved with unique features, different ethnicities, expressions, even cranial shapes. Over 100 faces stare outward as if representing a gathering of lost nations. Who were they, and why immortalize them in stone? Could Tiwanaku have been not a city but a meeting place? A convergence of ancient cultures that shared a single cosmic language? Modern researchers using 3D laser scanning have confirmed tolerances so tight they rival machined metal. Some surfaces show micro-scratches consistent with rapid tool rotation. Others bear traces of intense localized heat, as if the stone had been softened or reshaped while still solid. To conventional archaeology, such phenomena are unexplained anomalies. To those who study lost technology, they are fingerprints, evidence of methods we no longer understand. Yet the deeper mystery may not be how these stones were shaped, but why they were left unfinished. Scattered across Puma Punku are half-cut blocks, fragments mid-process, as if construction halted in an instant. The stones lie as though thrown by some cataclysm, an earthquake, a flood, or something greater. Legends of the Aymara speak of the night when the stars fell, when the gods wept fire and turned day to darkness. Could a celestial event, a comet perhaps, have ended the age of the builders? Whatever happened, Tiwanaku never truly died. Later cultures, the Inca, the Aymara, built their temples upon its ruins, inheriting the architecture but not the secret. They saw the stones as sacred relics, remnants of a divine age. When the Spanish arrived, they too were stunned. "These buildings are not the work of men," one conquistador wrote. "They were made by giants." Perhaps in a sense they were. Giants not in size but in knowledge. The architects of Tiwanaku seem to have understood something we have forgotten: the harmony between matter and vibration, between stone and sky. And as we follow that resonance northward, through jungles and centuries, we encounter another people who inherited that same obsession with time, architecture, and the heavens, the Maya, whose pyramids and calendars turned astronomy into art. Their cities, hidden under green canopies, are waiting. Their calendars whisper not of years, but of cycles. Worlds that end and worlds that begin again. The jungle never forgets, it only hides. For centuries, the ruins of the Maya world slept beneath a sea of green, stone pyramids swallowed by ceiba roots, temples disguised as hills, cities devoured by silence. When explorers first reached them, they thought these were isolated monuments, but as satellites and LiDAR peeled back the canopy, the truth emerged. An entire civilization had once thrived here, vast, interconnected, and obsessed with time. Among the most haunting discoveries was El Mirador, deep within the Petén Basin of northern Guatemala. Before the classical cities of Tikal or Palenque ever rose, El Mirador already stood, a metropolis sprawling over 150 square kilometers, with causeways stretching for miles through dense rainforest. Its central pyramid, La Danta, towers more than 70 meters high. In sheer volume, it surpasses even the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet El Mirador was built 1,000 years before the Maya Golden Age. That means when the world still imagined the Maya as primitive, they were already architects of mountains. Archaeologists have uncovered causeways paved with lime and stone, aqueducts, and a hydraulic network designed to channel rainwater across elevated terrain. These were not the works of nomads or farmers, they were the infrastructure of planners, astronomers, and engineers. On the walls of El Mirador's temples, faint reliefs depict serpents, suns, and twin deities, early forms of the gods that would later dominate Mesoamerican religion. Their mythology, already in place, speaks of creation not as a beginning, but as a cycle, echoing far older patterns found at Caral and Tiwanaku. But it is their writing and calendar that reveal the depth of Maya genius. Their hieroglyphic script, a system of over 800 signs, appeared in its earliest known forms fully developed, not gradually evolving like Egyptian or Sumerian cuneiform. Scholars still debate how it emerged so suddenly. Some think it was inherited from the Olmec or an even older unnamed culture. Whatever its source, this script could record not only speech but ideas, cosmic cycles, dreams, and mythic histories measured in thousands of years. Their calendar was even more astonishing. 3 systems intertwined like gears in a celestial clock: the Tzolk'in, 260 days, the Hab, 365 days, and the Long Count, which tracked days continuously from a creation date equivalent to August 11th, 3114 BCE. When European astronomers were still adjusting their Gregorian leap years, the Maya calendar had already achieved an accuracy within seconds of the true solar year. They built entire cities to embody that knowledge. Temples aligned precisely with solstices and equinoxes. Staircases framed the rising of Venus. Window slits caught the first light of the morning star at the same angle every 8 years. At Uxmal, the Pyramid of the Magician aligns with lunar cycles. At Chichen Itza, the serpent shadow of Kukulkan descends its steps at equinox. Time wasn't measured here, it was performed. But what kind of civilization lives to serve the rhythm of the cosmos rather than the will of kings? The Maya saw time not as a straight line, but as a breathing organism. Days as spirits, years as deities, worlds as recurring dreams. Every era ended in fire and was born again from water. In that worldview, nothing was truly lost. It was only waiting for its turn to return. Still, questions persist. Why did their script and architecture appear so suddenly? Why do their earliest cities display such mathematical perfection, as though based on an inherited code? Some researchers believe the Maya built upon foundations left by even earlier cultures now buried under the rainforest, their designs mimicking celestial blueprints passed down through memory. Others see in their obsidian mirrors and astronomical instruments the faint echo of a technology that measured not machines, but consciousness itself. When the classic Maya cities fell around the 9th century CE, their people did not vanish. They simply dispersed, carrying fragments of their sacred calendar, their symbols, and their songs into the highlands. Even now, in the villages of Guatemala and Chiapas, shamans still track the Tzolk'in, reciting day names that have been whispered for more than 3,000 years. Time to them is alive. It can be spoken to. It can be healed. And perhaps that is what the ancient builders of El Mirador were trying to tell us. That civilization is not measured in empires, but in the harmony between human breath and the pulse of the universe. Yet the Maya did not build only upward toward the sky. They built downward into the underworld, into the caves, cenotes, and rivers they believed connected the living world to the divine. To follow them further, we must descend beneath the temples, into the darkness below, where water glows like liquid glass and echoes carry prayers from the surface to the gods. Beneath the temples and pyramids of the Maya world lies another city, one built not of sunlight and stone, but of darkness, echoes and water. It begins where the earth opens into cenotes, deep circular wells scattered across the Yucatan Peninsula, gateways to the underworld the Maya called Xibalba. For the ancient Maya, these pools were not merely sources of water, they were portals. They reflected the sky like mirrors, forming a bridge between worlds. In their myths, the gods descended through such openings to create humanity from maize and blood, and so the Maya built their sacred architecture above these wells, anchoring their temples along the veins of the earth. At Chichen Itza, beneath the towering pyramid of El Castillo, ground-penetrating radar revealed a hidden chamber, a natural cenote directly beneath the temple's core. It wasn't coincidence. The pyramid was intentionally built at this intersection, aligning the heavens above with the waters below. When the equinox sun strikes its steps and the shadow of the serpent god Kukulkan slithers down the staircase, that serpent's tail ends not on stone, but in the mouth of the cenote. A cosmic axis is complete, heaven, earth, and underworld connected by geometry and light. Inside the cenote itself, divers have found gold, jade, obsidian, and human remains, offerings cast into the depths as gifts to the rain god Chak. Far from the image of barbaric sacrifice, these rituals were acts of balance. Blood and treasure returned to the living water to ensure the renewal of life. Archaeologists have retrieved thousands of artifacts, jade necklaces, clay effigies, even wooden idols preserved by the cool stillness of the water. But the greatest discoveries lie deeper still. In 2018, Mexican divers mapped the Sac Actun cave system, over 350 kilometers of flooded tunnels, the largest underwater cave network on Earth. Within its chambers, they found altars, carved pillars, and traces of ritual fire sealed in air pockets untouched for millennia. The soot on those walls has been dated to the time of the earliest Maya cities. Someone had walked there before the caves flooded, lighting torches, performing ceremonies in darkness so complete that sound became sacred. The architecture of these hidden worlds was not improvised. Many passageways mirror the layout of temples above, as if the Maya designed their pyramids as reflections of what lay below. Acoustic studies have revealed that sounds made in the caves, chanting, drumming, even footsteps, reverberate in deliberate harmonics, amplifying into low resonant tones that seem almost alive. These places were built to speak with the unseen. At Palanca, the tomb of King Pakal rests atop a stairway that descends into a symbolic underworld. His sarcophagus lid shows him reclining in a machine-like structure surrounded by celestial symbols, a scene often misinterpreted by fringe theorists as evidence of technology, but which may instead depict something subtler, the soul navigating the cosmic tree, rising and falling through the dimensions of time. The Maya called their underground chambers Ch'en, meaning mouth of the earth. To enter one was to die symbolically and be reborn. Priests and shamans would descend with torches, chanting in the rhythm of the heartbeat, invoking the gods of death and rebirth. When they emerged, dripping with sacred water, they carried messages, visions, that guided their cities. Modern divers describe an almost supernatural experience. The deeper they go, the quieter it becomes. The light fades to a soft blue. Stalactites shimmer like chandeliers. In some chambers, the water is so still that it mirrors perfectly, blurring the line between above and below. It's easy to understand why the Maya saw these places as cosmic mirrors, where a person could look down and see the sky. And perhaps that's the hidden genius of their architecture. The Maya didn't separate the physical from the spiritual. Every temple had a shadow beneath it. Every step toward the heavens had an echo below. Civilization to them was a vertical continuum, the soul's ascent and descent mapped in limestone and water. When Spanish chroniclers arrived, they destroyed the idols and sealed many of the cenotes. But the silence remained. Even now, in the stillness of those underground lakes, the water holds the reflection of temples long collapsed, the shimmer of torchlight long extinguished. And sometimes divers report strange sounds, low hums, rhythmic pulses, like the whisper of a distant drum. Perhaps it's only the echo of water moving through stone. Or perhaps it's something else, the memory of prayers rising through the dark, reaching for the surface, where sunlight still falls upon the serpent's shadow at equinox. From these subterranean worlds of water and silence, the trail of forgotten architecture rises again, this time northward, toward a vast city built not in the jungle, but in an open valley of stone. A city that even the Aztecs would later call the place where humans become gods. We ascend now toward Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, a place whose builders remain nameless and whose silence speaks louder than any inscription ever could. 50 kilometers northeast of modern Mexico City rises a valley of ghosts, vast, geometric, and eerily silent. The locals call it Teotihuacan, the place where humans become gods, Huax. From the air, its layout looks like a circuit board of stone, broad avenues, stepped pyramids, and plazas arranged with impossible precision. The scale defies belief. 2,000 years ago, this was the largest city in the Americas, rivaling Rome and Beijing in size, yet no one knows who built it. By the time the Aztecs found Teotihuacan in the 14th century, it had already been abandoned for nearly a millennium. They treated it as holy ground, believing the gods themselves had created it after a great cataclysm to restart the sun. They offered sacrifices at its pyramids, trying to rekindle the cosmic balance its builders once maintained. But beneath their reverence lay ignorance. The city's original name, its language, its rulers, all erased. The Avenue of the Dead runs for nearly 3 kilometers, aligned exactly 15.5 degrees east of north. At its heart stands the Pyramid of the Sun, built from over 3 million tons of stone, its base almost identical in size to Egypt's Great Pyramid. Across from it lies the Pyramid of the Moon, mirroring its form, smaller, yet placed on a higher terrace to balance the skyline. Between them stretches a boulevard that once hosted processions of priests, astronomers, and perhaps the rulers themselves, whoever they were. Excavations reveal that the city was planned from the start. Streets meet at right angles, drainage channels run beneath plazas, and multi-story apartment compounds hint at advanced urban management. The walls were once painted red, covered in murals of jaguars, eagles, and suns, symbols of transformation and rebirth. Yet there are no images of kings or dynasties. The city speaks in collective symbols, not individual egos. It feels more like a machine for ceremony than a human settlement. Beneath the Pyramid of the Sun, archaeologists discovered a tunnel filled with offerings: jade, obsidian, seashells from distant coasts, and the bones of animals from the jungle. Crocodiles, jaguars, and birds that never lived in the highlands. These were not decorations. They were deliberate connections between worlds, linking the city to the sea, the sky, and the underworld. Then in 2003, another tunnel was found beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, Quetzalcoatl, a passage descending more than 100 meters into the earth. Inside, archaeologist Sergio Gomez and his team discovered thousands of artifacts, carved statues, pottery, mirrors of polished pyrite, and mysterious spheres coated in metallic dust. When lights were shone upon them, they glowed like embers. The air itself shimmered with traces of liquid mercury pooled along the chamber floor. Mercury, a liquid metal associated with transformation and divinity in many ancient cultures. How did they acquire it, transport it, and store it without poisoning themselves? And why here, beneath a temple aligned to the stars? Some speculate it represented a mirror of the heavens, a subterranean sky where gods walked in reflection. Others see it as symbolic of blood flowing beneath the city's heart. The city's entire design mirrors celestial geometry. The Avenue of the Dead aligns with the setting of the Pleiades. The pyramids correspond to the positions of major planets. From above, the pattern resembles Orion's belt, the same constellation mirrored by the pyramids of Giza. Two civilizations, oceans apart, both encoding the heavens in stone. Coincidence or inheritance? The absence of writing in Teotihuacan may not mean ignorance, but secrecy. Symbols of serpents, stars, and suns appear again and again, suggesting a visual code understood by initiates. Perhaps this was a place where knowledge was transmitted through architecture, sound, and ritual rather than text. Recent studies show that standing atop the Pyramid of the Moon, a clap of the hands produces a sharp echo, not random, but tuned to mimic the call of the Quetzal bird, sacred messenger of the gods. The entire plaza acts as a resonator. Teotihuacan was designed to speak, and yet, at some point around the 6th century CE, the city fell. Archaeological layers show fires sweeping through palaces and temples, but not the homes of commoners. This suggests an internal uprising, perhaps a rebellion against a priestly elite or the collapse of a cosmic order no longer sustained. Whatever happened, Teotihuacan was abandoned. Its rituals ended, its lights extinguished, its name forgotten. Today, when you stand on the Pyramid of the Sun and watch the mist rise across the valley, the city feels alive again. The geometry hums quietly in your bones. The wind carries faint whispers that sound almost like chanting. It is as if the stones remember their purpose, waiting for the next cycle when humans will once again become gods. But Teotihuacan was not alone. Across the continent, other civilizations built with the same silent precision, aligning mounds to solstices, rivers to stars. And further north, another metropolis once rose beside the Mississippi, where wood replaced stone, but the language of the cosmos remained the same. We journey next to Cahokia, the forgotten city of the north, where a civilization flourished in the shadow of time, then vanished, leaving only mounds that still breathe under the grass. If you travel to the banks of the Mississippi River, near modern-day St. Louis, you'll see what looks like a series of soft green hills rising from the plain. They seem ordinary at first, gentle, natural swells of earth, until you realize they are pyramids. Thousands of years ago, this land was home to a city as complex as any in the ancient world. Its name was Cahokia, and it was the beating heart of a civilization that time forgot. At its peak, around 1100 CE, Cahokia covered more than 6 square miles and was home to 40,000 people, a population larger than London at the same time. There were grand plazas, ceremonial causeways, wooden palisades, and more than 100 earthen mounds arranged with mathematical precision. At the centre rose Monk's Mound, a platform the size of a pyramid, built from 22 million cubic feet of earth, carried basket by hand. From its summit, priests and astronomers watched the heavens, the same sky their ancestors had tracked for thousands of years. Every year, as the solstice sun rose, it shone through a circle of tall wooden posts now known as Woodhenge. The alignment was perfect. The central post framed the sunrise on the exact day of the equinox, dividing the year into its sacred halves. Cahokia's architects understood solar cycles, agriculture, and geometry. They turned the flat American prairie into a cosmic observatory. The people of Cahokia traded copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, obsidian from the Rockies, and mica from the Appalachian Mountains. Networks of rivers became arteries of commerce, carrying goods and ideas across a continent. Archaeologists have found elaborate jewellery, effigy pipes, and finely woven fabrics, proof of artisanship and a structured society with labour specialisation. They even practiced large-scale urban planning, streets aligned with cardinal directions, residential districts, and communal spaces. And yet, no one knows what they called themselves. The name Cahokia comes from a later tribe that settled the area centuries after the city's fall. Like Teotihuacan, it's a label we gave to an unknown civilization whose original identity remains buried. Some early European explorers could hardly believe what they saw. A mound greater than the works of Egypt, one wrote, yet built of mere earth. Others dismissed the idea that indigenous people could have constructed such monuments, proposing instead lost tribes or refugees from Atlantis. Modern archaeology has long since proven those theories false, but the mystery of how Cahokia rose and why it fell remains unsolved. The soil itself holds clues. Beneath the layers of clay, scientists have found evidence of flooding and drought, alternating cycles that may have disrupted crops and driven the people away. Still, there are deeper signs, cultural echoes linking Cahokia to older traditions across the Americas. The spiral and cross motifs carved into shell pendants resemble the cosmograms of the Maya. The four-directional layout of the city mirrors the design of Teotihuacan. Even the wood-henge circle shares an ancient language: sky worship, timekeeping, and renewal. Some researchers suspect that Cahokia was part of a continental memory, an inheritance of cosmic architecture that stretched from the Andes to the Mississippi. Others believe its builders were guided by visions, aligning their city not just to the sun, but to the rhythm of Earth itself. In Ohio, Wisconsin, and Iowa, other clues remain. Vast effigy mounds shaped like birds, bears, and serpents, visible only from the air. The Great Serpent Mound winds across the landscape for over 400 meters, its coils precisely aligned with lunar standstills that occur only once every 18.6 years. To carve such patterns without modern instruments required both patience and astronomical mastery. When you stand before the Serpent Mound at dusk, the earth seems to breathe beneath your feet. The snake's head points toward the setting sun at the solstice. Its tail curves toward the moonrise. For ancient peoples, this wasn't just art, it was communication. The land itself became a text written in soil and light, a record of time that could be read by the sky. Yet, as at Teotihuacan and Caral, the story ends abruptly. Sometime after 1300 CE, Cahokia emptied. The wood rotted, the plazas flooded, the mounds softened into hills. No war, no invaders, only a quiet dispersal. Perhaps the people followed the rivers outward, carrying fragments of their calendar and myths to new homelands. Their descendants, the Natchez, the Choctaw, the Mississippian tribes, still speak of sacred mounds as places where earth touches sky. Today, the city's outlines remain visible from above, a network of geometry too perfect to be coincidence. Archaeologists can map every mound, every alignment, but they cannot measure the awe those builders must have felt when the first sunrise pierced through Woodhenge, when the people below watched their city come alive with light. It is said that the ground remembers even when people forget. The mounds breathe through seasons, whispering in wind and grass, and perhaps beneath their layers of clay, the spirit of the builders still lingers, waiting for someone to listen again to the rhythm of their world. From here, the story winds westward, into lands of canyons and stone, where another people, the ancestral Puebloans, etched the sun and moon into the walls of cliffs and aligned their roads with the stars. Their cities were carved from desert rock, their calendars etched in shadow, and in the desert silence, their architecture still ticks, a clock made of sunlight and stone. The desert of the American Southwest seems endless, mesas and cliffs rising like fossilized waves, air shimmering with heat, silence heavy as stone. Yet within that silence lie traces of a civilization that once turned this arid expanse into a network of light and geometry. They are known today as the ancestral Puebloans, but their descendants still call themselves the people of the sun and sky. Their cities were not built upon rivers, nor hidden in jungles, but carved directly from stone. The most extraordinary of them all was Chaco Canyon, in what is now New Mexico. From above, it appears as a spiral of sandstone structures radiating from a central plaza. Great houses with hundreds of rooms, built with precision that rivals any ancient metropolis. Walls of alternating sandstone and timber create a pattern so consistent it acts like an architectural heartbeat, pulsing through every structure. At first glance, Chaco's desolation seems to contradict its grandeur. There are no nearby streams, few trees, and summers that burn like fire. Yet between the 9th and 12th centuries CE, this barren canyon was the centre of a vast regional network stretching hundreds of kilometres in every direction. Roads, straight as arrows and eerily wide, cut through the desert, connecting more than 150 outlying settlements. They were not random paths, many aligned precisely with solar and lunar cycles, visible only from the air or across long distances. Some of these roads, such as the Great North Road, run perfectly straight for miles, even across cliffs and canyons, without deviation. Modern surveyors have confirmed that the route's bearings are aligned with true north. Why would ancient builders, without compasses or aerial maps, carve such paths through rock and emptiness? To the Puebloan worldview, these were not just roads, they were lines of power, ritual corridors used to mirror the movements of the sun and moon. Inside the great houses, evidence of astronomical observation is everywhere. Windows and doorways are positioned to frame specific events, solstices, equinoxes, and lunar standstills. The most famous of these alignments lies at Fajada Butte, a solitary sandstone spire rising from the canyon floor. There, carved into the rock, is a spiral petroglyph illuminated by 3 thin shafts of sunlight. On the morning of the summer solstice, a single dagger of light pierces the centre of the spiral. On the winter solstice, 2 daggers bracket it perfectly. The sight has come to be known as the sun dagger. This phenomenon is so precise that even minor shifts in the rock, caused by erosion or earthquakes, have disrupted it. To the people who created it, such accuracy wasn't scientific vanity, it was a sacred responsibility. Time was not a concept to measure, it was a living being that had to be honoured, fed and watched. The sun dagger was their conversation with the sky, renewed every season for centuries. But how did such a complex society flourish in a desert? Archaeologists now know that Chaco's builders engineered a vast hydrological system, dams, canals, and reservoirs designed to capture the brief seasonal rains. They cultivated maize, beans, and squash in terraced fields, and used turkey feathers woven into blankets to endure the winter cold. They traded turquoise, copper bells, and shells from as far as Mexico, linking the Southwest to Mesoamerica in a chain of commerce and shared symbolism. In the kivas, circular ceremonial chambers built underground, priests and astronomers performed rituals timed to the celestial clock. The round walls, plastered smooth, were designed to echo sound like drums. When chants rose within them, the vibrations carried through the stone itself. It was here that myth and mathematics merged. Stories of the Sipapu, the portal through which humanity first emerged from the underworld, retold in rhythm with the dance of planets. Chaco's decline remains mysterious. Around 1150 CE, drought struck the region, and the roads that once pulsed with life fell silent. Some great houses were ritually sealed, doorways blocked, fire pits extinguished, offerings buried beneath polished floors. The people did not vanish. They migrated, carrying their sky stories to new homelands, the Hopi Mesas, Zuni Pueblos, Acoma, Taos, and beyond. To this day, the descendants of those builders still perform ceremonies that trace the same solstice paths their ancestors watched in Chaco, and scattered through the desert, the roads remain. They are visible from the air as faint scars running north, east, and west, lines carved into eternity. Engineers who've studied them note that they seem designed not for transport but for visibility. They connect not towns but directions. They point toward the horizon, towards something beyond the human world. At sunset, when the red light spills across the canyon walls, Chaco feels like a vast sundial, a city built to measure the heartbeat of the cosmos. Every window becomes a lens, every shadow a second. The desert glows golden, then fades to indigo, and the Milky Way unfurls like a celestial road above. It is the same road the Pueblos still call the Path of Souls, where spirits travel westward to rejoin the ancestors. In this way, the story of the Americas repeats its rhythm. Architecture as astronomy, geometry as faith, cities aligned not for kings but for the cosmos. But south of here, the forest tells another story, one of abundance, mystery, and disappearance. Beneath the Amazon canopy, the myths of El Dorado and the Golden Cities may have hidden something far more profound. Not treasure, but an entire ecosystem engineered by forgotten hands. We descend now from desert stone into living green, where ancient roads become rivers and civilization grows not upon the earth, but within it. For centuries, explorers chased a legend through the Amazon, the story of El Dorado, the golden city hidden within an endless sea of trees. Men vanished into that green labyrinth seeking its treasure. None returned with gold, but their tales persisted, of wide roads, earth mounds, and entire villages glimpsed beneath the vines. Scholars dismissed them as delirium, mirages born of heat, hunger, and fever. The Amazon, they said, was a pristine wilderness, too poor in nutrients to support civilization, but the forest keeps secrets well. And now, with the eyes of satellites and the precision of LiDAR, the myth is breathing again. In 2022, researchers mapping the Bolivian Amazon uncovered a revelation. Beneath the canopy, they found hundreds of interconnected cities, complete with causeways, canals, pyramids, and terraces, all invisible to the naked eye. These weren't isolated settlements. They were a network of urban landscapes, linked by straight roads and hydraulic systems stretching for miles. The air itself seemed to hum with the geometry of the impossible. These discoveries belong to what archaeologists now call the Casarabe culture, flourishing between 500 and 1400 CE, roughly contemporary with medieval Europe. Their largest sites, like Kotoka and Landivar, feature raised platforms and conical pyramids built of packed earth, connected by elevated causeways that rise above floodplain waters. At the edges of each city lie canals, fish ponds, and irrigation fields, not scars on the land, but symphonies of coexistence. The soil beneath these cities is terra preta, or black earth, a human-made soil enriched with charcoal, bone, and compost that remains fertile even after centuries. It is found across millions of hectares of Amazonia, a clear signature of deliberate design. This was not a wilderness. It was a cultivated forest, shaped by human hands into a living garden that fed thousands. The people who created it understood balance better than we do, using biodiversity itself as their architecture. The old story of El Dorado begins to look different. The gold may never have been metal at all. Perhaps it was the golden fertility of the soil, the shimmer of sunlight through engineered wetlands, or the sacred glow of a civilization that worshipped balance rather than conquest. Even colonial chronicles, once mocked, now sound prophetic. Friar Gaspar de Carvajal, travelling the Amazon in 1542, described vast towns along the riverbanks, each separated by cultivated fields and orchards. For centuries, historians dismissed his account as fantasy. Now LiDAR scans reveal patterns matching his words almost exactly, the ghosts of plazas, roads, and defensive walls still hiding under the trees. The implications are immense. For generations, we saw the Amazon as an untouched Eden, a place where nature ruled and man had barely entered. In truth, it was a garden civilization, one that flourished for millennia, then faded quietly into green oblivion when disease and colonization came. Its legacy is the forest itself, a biome still shaped by ancient design. To walk through this jungle now is to tread on buried avenues. Under every root lies a memory, clay fragments, broken ceramics, and the carbon-rich earth that still feeds today's crops. Anthropologists speak of earthworks, but the local indigenous peoples have always called them the bones of their ancestors. To them, these aren't ruins, they're living relatives, still breathing beneath the soil. And the legend of El Dorado, long painted as greed's illusion, may in fact preserve a truth. There was a city of abundance, but its treasure was knowledge, how to make the forest bloom endlessly. This challenges everything we thought we knew about human progress. The so-called primitive Amazonians achieved sustainability that modern society can barely imagine. They built without erasing, lived without exhausting, and vanished without poisoning what remained. When the jungle reclaimed their world, it did not destroy their work. It became their monument. Under moonlight, the canopy ripples like a green ocean. You can almost feel the presence of invisible streets below, the rhythm of ancient water channels still directing the flow of rain. The forest is their cathedral now, its chorus sung by insects, its bells chimed by frogs and birds. From the floodplains of the Amazon to the highlands of the Andes, from the deserts of the southwest to the valleys of Mexico, a pattern repeats. Civilizations rise, align themselves with nature and the heavens, then fall, leaving whispers instead of empires. But not all their knowledge vanished. Some of it travelled farther than we think, across oceans, encoded in myths and maps that would reappear in the Old World centuries later. Because the next chapter of this mystery asks a forbidden question. What if the ancient Americas were not isolated? What if their sailors, priests, and astronomers crossed seas long before Columbus, leaving their marks on maps, bloodlines, and legends around the world? To follow that possibility, we must step beyond continents into the open ocean, where the edge of history dissolves into the unknown. Every history we are taught begins with an ocean dividing the world. On one side, the Old World, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece. On the other, the New, the Americas, pristine and untouched until 1492. Between them, the Atlantic yawns like a wall. But what if that wall was never there? What if the ocean wasn't a barrier, but a bridge? And the story of humanity is one of connection, not isolation. The first crack in that wall came not from legend, but from a map. In 1929, in the dusty archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, a curious document surfaced, the Piri Reis map. Drawn on gazelle skin by an Ottoman admiral in 1513, it depicted the coastlines of Africa, South America, and, astonishingly, what appeared to be Antarctica, centuries before it was officially discovered. Even stranger, the landmass was shown ice-free, with mountain ranges that modern sonar later confirmed exist beneath the frozen sheet. Piri Reis claimed he compiled his map from 20 ancient sources, some Greek, some Arabic, and some drawn before the flood. If that claim is even partly true, then fragments of a prehistoric maritime tradition survived into the Renaissance, preserving memories of coasts mapped long before recorded history. Yet the Piri Reis map is not alone. Other charts from the 15th and 16th centuries, the Orontius Phineus, the Zeno, and the Boachi maps also display surprisingly accurate outlines of continents then unknown to Europeans. Scholars call these anomalous projections. But taken together, they whisper of something larger, a network of knowledge carried across millennia, copied, distorted, and reborn. How could this be? Did earlier civilizations possess global navigation long before the compass? Ancient traditions around the world seem to hint at it. Polynesian navigators crossed the Pacific guided by stars, waves, and bird flight, steering without instruments. The Phoenicians sailed around Africa 3,000 years ago. Egyptian papyri describe the land of the West beyond the Great Sea, and in the Americas, legends tell of bearded visitors from across the water, teachers, traders, or gods, who brought seeds, metal, or stories of the stars. Genetic and botanical clues lend weight to the idea. Traces of nicotine and cocaine, plants native only to the Americas, have been detected in Egyptian mummies. Conversely, certain varieties of sweet potato, a South American crop, were present in Polynesia thousands of years ago. How did they cross oceans separated by 10,000 miles? Trade winds, rafts, or simply time? Perhaps all three. Then there's the controversial Solutrean hypothesis that Ice Age Europeans, following the edge of the Atlantic pack ice, reached North America as early as 20,000 years ago. Stone tools found on the Chesapeake Bay's seabed bear striking resemblance to those from Paleolithic France. Mainstream science resists this idea, fearing it overshadows indigenous origins, but the theory's persistence underscores a deeper truth, that humanity's urge to cross boundaries is older than any nation, older than memory itself. Even within the Americas, we find echoes of ancient globalism. Olmec jade traced to Guatemala, spondylus shells from Ecuador found in Mexico, and copper from the Great Lakes appearing in Mesoamerican artifacts. Evidence of trade that spanned a hemisphere. These networks mirror the world's ocean currents, as if guided by the same invisible geometry that links continents. To imagine such voyages is to reawaken a forgotten confidence in human possibility. We have always been explorers, reading clouds as compasses, stars as maps, birds as omens. A dugout canoe on the Pacific or a reed boat on the Atlantic might seem fragile, yet the ocean rewards patience and pattern recognition. Sailors who understood its pulse could cross not by luck, but by design. Perhaps that's why myths across cultures describe the same recurring motif, knowledge descending from the sea. In Sumer, it was Oannes, the fishman who brought writing. In Egypt, Osiris came from the waters of the Nile Delta. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl arrived from the eastern sea, promising to return. Even in the Andes, Viracocha emerged from Lake Titicaca, bearing tools of civilization. Different names, same pattern. A messenger from beyond the waves, bringing remembrance of an older world. If these myths share a root, then old world and new were never separate at all. They were the two halves of a single rhythm, divided only by forgetfulness. Today, oceanographers have begun to map submerged plateaus and ruins along both coasts. Possible remnants of coastal civilizations drowned when Ice Age glaciers melted. Off the Bahamas, divers trace the Bimini Road, a line of massive limestone blocks that some claim once formed a harbour. Off Cuba's western shore, sonar has revealed geometric formations, pyramids and avenues resting half a kilometre below the surface. Whether natural or man-made, they evoke the same timeless question. How much of our history sleeps beneath the sea? Perhaps the last great connection between these worlds lies precisely there, under the waves, in that twilight zone where myth becomes archaeology, because every voyage ends where it began, in water, and so we turn our gaze to the depths, where the final echo of this 13,000-year mystery still waits. A drowned world, half memory, half legend, that ancient storytellers called Atlantis. At the edge of the Cuban shelf, where the Caribbean Sea falls suddenly into darkness, sonar scans have revealed a city that should not exist. Pyramids, boulevards, rectangular foundations arranged with eerie precision half a kilometre below the surface. When the images surfaced in 2001, geologists said they must be natural formations, but divers who descended there described carved steps, polished stone blocks, and symmetry that nature rarely achieves. The site became known simply as Cuban Atlantis, a name that both invites and deflects belief. Whether true or illusion, the idea is older than the sea itself. It began with Plato, 24 centuries ago, who wrote that beyond the Pillars of Hercules lay an island, larger than Libya and Asia combined. There, he said, a civilization once reigned with temples of gold, crystal walls, and canals gleaming with silver. But in a single day and night of misfortune, the earth shook and the island sank beneath the waves. For generations, scholars treated this as allegory, a moral tale of hubris and divine retribution. Yet across the Americas, myths echo the same refrain: a great flood, a sky of fire, and cities swallowed by water. The Maya Popol Vuh speaks of the first dawn destroyed by deluge. The Inca tell of Lake Titicaca rising to drown the people of the sun. The Hopi remember the Third World ending in flood before humans emerged anew. In the north, the Mississippians spoke of a serpent who uncoiled beneath the rivers, bringing destruction and renewal. Could these be fragments of memory, not metaphor, but testimony? 12 to 13,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended, sea levels rose more than 120 meters. Entire continental shelves vanished. Coastal plains that once supported human life, from the Yucatan to Florida, from Brazil to the Bahamas, were drowned. If civilizations had flourished there, their remains now rest beneath centuries of sediment. Oceanographers mapping the seafloor have found dozens of such anomalies: stone terraces off Bimini, walls off Yonaguni, ruins off Cuba, and India's Gulf of Cambat. Each time the debate repeats: coincidence or construction? At Bimini, divers traced megalithic blocks forming what looks like a paved causeway. The stones align roughly with the solstice sunrise, as if placed deliberately. Critics call it beach rock, fractured by erosion. Yet in the dim light beneath the waves, geometry asserts itself. Lines too straight, corners too deliberate, as though the sea itself cannot quite erase the hand of design. But the meaning of these submerged worlds may run deeper than archaeology. Water, across cultures, is both destroyer and preserver. It buries, yet it also remembers. Beneath the Atlantic's restless surface, currents still flow across the same routes that may once have connected continents. Within those waters swirl sediments from vanished lands, tiny grains that once formed walls, temples, and roads. Every tide in its ceaseless rhythm becomes a heartbeat of the Earth's own memory. Perhaps Atlantis, then, was never one city but a pattern, a recurring rhythm in human history. A civilization rises, masters its world, forgets its balance, and is reclaimed by the elements. Each flood erases but also renews. Each disappearance plants the seed for what comes next. The Maya counted such endings as worlds, 4 or 5 in total, each separated by cataclysm, each reborn from the ruins of the last. The 13,000-year cycle is not only a date, it is a pulse. If we listen carefully, we can still hear it, in the black layers of soot and iridium that mark ancient extinctions, in the myths that mirror one another across oceans, in the silent coordinates of the monuments aligned to the heavens. The Earth keeps time, and every 12,000 to 13,000 years, something resets. Ice melts, seas rise, stars shift. The clock of catastrophe turns again. And now, as our satellites scan the oceans and our climate trembles at the edges, that rhythm seems to stir once more. Perhaps we stand at the threshold of another turning. Perhaps the drowned cities of the past are warning us, in the only language left to them, silence and depth. When you stand on the shore at night and the horizon fades into black, you might feel it. That sense that something vast once lived out there, just beyond the waves. The sea breathes in and out like an ancient creature remembering itself. The stars shimmer above it, reflected in the dark mirror of the water, and for a moment it's impossible to tell which is sky and which is sea, which is past and which is now, because history is not a line, it is a tide. It advances, recedes and returns, carrying pieces of forgotten worlds with it. If these mysteries stir something within you, a sense of déjà vu, of memories older than history, you are not alone. Where are you listening from tonight, and at what time? If you find these echoes of lost worlds as haunting as we do, consider subscribing so the next story may find you wherever you are when the tide turns again.